do hear me out, ladies and gentlemen. I got a feeling there's going to be some things which you really want to know about that the government are going to be implementing to sexually indoctrinate your 3-year-olds and to sexually indoctrinate your 7-year-olds and to sexually indoctrinate your 11-year-olds through this plan, through this scheme, through this edumacation known as, I'm just going to get the abbreviation for it, is RSE, the Relationships and Sexuality Code. It's being imposed on Wales by the Senate, by the government, that mandates sexual education for as young as 3 years old. In some aspects, as we'll get into in a moment. But the fact that they're trying to even bring certain concepts onto 3-year-olds should really, really worry you. Especially when you see where some of these ideas are being backed from, namely radically left-wing, quote-unquote, charities, the ones that are, pro-pride, pro-LGBT, the unbreakable Wi-Fi code mafia mob, right? That want, the target is your children. They want to sexually indoctrinate your children. They do so off the back of the work of people like Alfred Kinsey, John Money. It's people who are quote-unquote academics, but their entire academic field, believe it or not, was basically sexually abusing children. They were two pedophile sexologists, which if you've watched the film What is a Woman, you know about these two gentlemen. You know about a book, for example, that Alfred Kinsey, which if you look at this guy, I'm going to pull him up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. If you just look at this guy, don't you think that this guy is just absolutely great to be teaching, how many, for example, orgasms, or investigating how many orgasms a 6-month-old male baby can have? Yeah, that's real, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I was lying to you. But in, for example, Mr. Kinsey's book, which I believe he wrote in 1948, and it is called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, there's a table in that book in which he documents the number of orgasms children can have going all the way down to 6 months. This is the man that all of the gender queer theory stuff is based on. This is the origins of the movements based on the research that spawned it. It was evil, completely evil, from the very start. Yet we've just taken all of this up in modern day and think that it's fucking normal, all of the stuff that spawned from it. Now, if you speak out against it, you could lose your job, you could be character assassinated, you could potentially even go to prison. Especially if you're a parent that maybe doesn't want your child being sexually indoctrinated via the school system. So make no mistake, that is happening, and that is the goal. Politicians want this, okay? That you could potentially face punishment. You could potentially face, very bad outcomes because they're mandating this. They're mandating this, and they welcome it. Just look at this video. I've covered this MS before, but I can't remember what her name is. I ask you, do you want, this person, just from the way she speaks about this now, do you want this person, really in some ways, anywhere near your children, but certainly being the one championing the restriction of parental rights when it comes to things like child sexual education as young as 3 years old?
And I'm going to welcome the fact that the Minister has removed the right of withdrawal and is sticking with RSE and health relationships, and that the Welsh Government is going to make that mandatory. And I'm really, really pleased that that is happening. And that is exactly what will happen in schools with allowing RSE education and not allowing the parents to withdraw.
They're giving this the thumbs up.
Through fear or misunderstanding, which it very often is. And
fear, indeed. fear indeed, and it's not misunderstanding a lot of the time, is because parents know exactly what the children are being taught, and they're not happy about it, with very good reason. Very good reason. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, one thing to get off the table, though, is this is different from the old system. This is different from the old system. There was an amendment passed, however, to do with the rights of parents to withdraw pupils or children from RSE. And make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, I know that they are pushing this hard, pretty much in all areas of education, that if you don't want to go along with this, if you want to personally object to being taught these kinds of things because either you don't think it's appropriate or you want no part of it, the school system will come down hard. School system will come down hard on you. Make no mistake about it. But it says here, if a parent of a pupil at a school requests that the pupil is wholly or partly excused from receiving teaching and learning encompassing the mandatory element of the relationships and sexuality education at school, pupil must be excused until the request is withdrawn. So I'm not sure if this post that I'm getting this from isn't written out very well for me to be able to see if this is from the current bill or if this is from the old system. I'd assume, given that they've literally just said this new system is being made completely mandatory, that these actually would not apply. If the parent of a child for whom funded non-maintained nursery education is provided requests that the child is wholly or partly excused from receiving teaching and learning encompassing the mandatory element of the relationships and sexuality education at the provider or funder of funded non-maintained nursery education, the child must be excused until the request is withdrawn. But this comes in 3 phases, ladies and gentlemen. Let me break it down for you now. It's from 3 phases. Now, phase 1 is from age 3. From age 3. Which is pretty much the onset of mandatory education in Wales and in the UK. That's nursery age, okay? Phase 2 starts from age 7, and phase 3 starts from age 11. These are the 3 phases. Now, in phase 1, what kind of learning do you get? So your 3-year-old sounds, sounds all completely innocent to start off with. The use of accurate terminology for all body parts. The use of accurate terminology for all body parts. And then you have an awareness of the human life cycle and that reproduction is a part of life. Now, taking this all together, ladies and gentlemen, already I think most of you would think that this is wholly inappropriate for a 3-year-old. This is wholly inappropriate for a 3-year-old. Even going back and learning the accurate terminology for all body parts, now that I think about it. When we were in school, I think this has only gotten worse since I was in school. You didn't even see any of the stuff in a textbook till you got to comprehensive school. So until you'd already hit phase 3, you didn't see any of this stuff. Now they're trying to bring in knowledge of sexual reproduction taught to you by whoever it is in the school system that probably has pronouns in their bio and weird purple, greenish, yellow hair, whatever the hell it is, right? Is teaching your child at 3 years old about the human life cycle? And you don't have and some of you are listening to this and you'll think, what's wrong with that? I would think, what's wrong with you? Do you not, as a parent, want control over when your kids learn this stuff? And then the government is mandating it from 3 years old. This is the only Kinsey could have dreamed of. You know what I mean? And this is all to do with expanding the diversity and equity of the education system, as we'll get onto in a minute when we see who's backing these initiatives. From age 7, children are taught about fertility and menstruation. They're also taught about attraction, sexuality, reproductive organs, and pregnancy. Important to remember this is all compulsory, ladies and gentlemen. So, for example, phase 2, an awareness of how positive and negative social and cultural norms regarding sex, gender, and sexuality influence relationships and behaviors. So then already at age 7, the struggle session is starting. Already at age 7, the struggle session is starting to then trying to put good and bad into the mix. On a 7-year-old, what is their chief concern really going to be? Probably hopscotch and football training. Why do they need to be taught, maybe you can have things like precocious puberty, whereby, okay, then you may need to teach, for example, some of them girls about menstruation, but that's on the parents. That's for the parents to do so in their specific instance, And that's why it's important for the parents, at least in my opinion, to have control over this, because then you decide when your child is ready to learn this. Nobody knows your child better than you do. And even with parents who you could argue, might not have the best grip on these things, if we want to maintain some kind of parental rights, we have to at least give people the benefit of the doubt in most instances, right? Unless it's an instance where you have good indication that the child is at risk of harm or abuse or anything like that. Okay? But you should not have weird strangers talking to your 7-year-old about positive and negative social and cultural norms regarding sex, gender, and sexuality, especially when they likely don't have the best moral compass and the best moral foundation to do this in the first place. As we see with many of school teachers nowadays, who are radically left-wing, ideologues. You also then, for example, I believe this is at phase 2, age 7 also, knowledge and understanding of how reproductive organs develop in a human body. This includes understanding fertility and the processes of reproduction, including what supports menstrual health and well-being, recognizing the process of pregnancy and birth. Again, this is all for the parents to do so, because you might, for example, have a young child already in your family, and then you end up getting pregnant with another child, and then obviously as you get bigger, the child may only be about 4 or 5 years old, and you're going to ask what's going on. But again, you give them to that in the way that you feel is appropriate. You're not going to be telling them all the things about the reproductive organs and stuff like that. No, it's just, oh, your little sister's on the way, that kind of stuff, right? Or your little brother's on the way, your little brother's growing right now, that kind of stuff, right? You don't go into all this thing about, well, mommy and daddy love each other very much, and they use these organs to do this because, mommy was in her fertile period and all of this stuff, right? This is very, very worrying stuff. You wouldn't explain it that way to your 7-year-old. You know what I mean? You can be sure with the people backing this coming through the public school system, this will be brought through in the most disgusting ways possible. You can damn right guarantee that. And obviously, as I said, ladies and gentlemen, diversity, equity, I'm not going to use the term equality because it's a misnomer, and inclusion runs through the code. Curriculum content must be inclusive and reflect diversity. Diversity of what? Diversity of what? Diversity with regards to, they try to rebrand them nowadays as minor attracted persons. Is that the kind of stuff that we're talking here? It must include learning that reflects a diversity of relationships, gender, and sexuality, including LGBTQ plus lives. As again, they're trying to indoctrinate your children into this standardizing, basically the killing off of our civilization, because you've got to take into account every relationship that is not a, standard heterosexual relationship outside of grave evils like IVF is basically a reproductive dead end. So, they're trying to make, further the depopulation narrative that all this stuff is normal, when it isn't. Welsh Government is committed to covering the following themes in RSE: relationships, rights and equity, sex, gender and sexuality, bodies and body image, sexual health and well-being, and violence, safety and support, to assist schools in their planning of RSE. These themes are interwoven into the learning strands. Across the learning strands, curriculum content in RSE must be inclusive and reflect diversity. It must include learning that develops learners' awareness and understanding of different identities, views and values, and a diversity of relationships, gender, sexuality, including LGBTQ plus lives. Learning about rights and equity, there we go, finally they're using the right term here. Runs through all the strands, as well as embedding learning and experience through a rights-based approach to learning. Rights without responsibility, however, is a key theme of what's running through Wales at the moment. We're constantly banging on about rights. So this is a restriction of rights. You can't prescribe Palestine action, for example, because there's a restriction on their rights. Everything rights, but no responsibility whatsoever. Many third sector organizations were consulted on the code, including Stonewall. Now, you know that charity's name from my conversation with James S's, for example, which if you haven't gone and listen to that, make sure you do. We talk about a lot of the charities that are directly trying to drive a wedge in between children and their parents, for example. They're doing very, very underhanded grooming things. A lot of this is grooming tactics, ladies and gentlemen. You have one charity, quote unquote, for example, always taxpayer funded, mind you. You have one charity, quote unquote, that was sending breast binders to young girls behind parents' backs. That charity was Mermaids. Stonewall, very vocal on rejecting the UK Supreme Court's verdict on biological sex, for example. Very, very radical. And you also have elements of the NSPCC and stuff like that, which influence this as well, which have also been captured by these far left radical ideologues that are now having substantial influence on your children's education. And you wonder why your child's coming out of primary school, saying that they're born in the wrong body, or, oh, I think I'm attracted to girls, when they shouldn't even, if they're a girl, for example, or boys saying I think they're attracted to boys, they shouldn't even be worried about that at fucking 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. They shouldn't even be worried about that. But this is where we have, with the increased secularization of society, we have no moral foundation to oppose any of this stuff anymore. We have no moral foundation to say that any of this stuff is even wrong. You have no moral foundation to say that anything is wrong. So why would you even have laws in the first place? But again, ladies and gentlemen, the big thing I want to bring you to is who is behind this. Because it's not just, the government. Well, it is the government at the heart of it. But outside of the government, sort of like a big octopus with the tentacles going out, you have all these quote-unquote charities, like I mentioned. And Ms. Lynn Neagle here is only too keen, thank God they're being very open about this, to thank and bring to light the contributions of people like Stonewall Cymru and all of these other pro-LGBT, radical, gender and trans, Marxist, usually, charities and organizations coming forward. And she's the education minister. The education minister is praising these radical charities that, again, are now, via the government, having drastic impact on your children's innocence, for lack of a better word, and growing up, in a safe and prosperous Wales. A lot of these initiatives are tied in with like Nation of Sanctuary and where is it? I've got something to talk about a little bit later in this episode. It's a charity known as Asylum Justice, which needs to be shut down as soon as possible, and has no business being, having any influence in Wales. I've got a very itchy nose at the minute, ladies and gentlemen. Please bear with me. I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure what's going on. I have a very, very itchy nose. But anyway, the Senate's RSE code, as we just talked about, made sex education mandatory for 3-year-olds. Stonewall were among the groups consulted. Senate member Lynn Neagle praised their contribution. She's now education minister. Let's throw you over to Ms. Neagle now, ladies and gentlemen. This is what she had to say.
I'd like to recognise all those organisations and individuals who made such a strong case for RSE to the committee. NSPCC Cymru Wales, Welsh Women's Aid, Stonewall Cymru, Brooke Cymru, Professor E.J. Reynolds and the Children's Commissioner for Wales. Many of these organisations have written individually to MSs in recent days, making a case for high-quality RSE from a position of far more expertise than I could ever claim to have. I'd like to...
You could never, ever get anything high quality. We talk about high quality. The quality of everything has just been going down the pan in pretty much everything in recent years. Everything that isn't far left radical money laundering schemes, basically. So she mentioned here some of the organizations she mentioned, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, you cannot trust any of these charities nowadays. NSPCC, the NSPCC Cymru Wales, can't trust them. Welsh Women's Aid. And say, after all this, ladies and gentlemen, the age of the Welsh, the age of the female liberal politician is over. The age of the female liberal politician is over. Welsh Women's Aid, Stonewall Cymru, Brooke Cymru, Professor E.J. Reynolds, which, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the professors, I believe, at Cardiff University, who will be coming up in a conversation I've got coming up with somebody that's a lot more versed in this than I am, particularly in Wales. And also you have Children's Commissioner for Wales. So all of the people that the government are supposedly meant to be there for your children to secure their well-being are actively doing the opposite, trying to indoctrinate them into thinking that this is in any way normal and good when it's not. It's actively contributing in pretty much every way to the destruction of Wales as a country and as a people. So all of these things are tied in together. Asylum justice and anti-racism and all of this stuff, decolonization, they're all tied in together. So you want to see as well, which we'll get onto in a moment, that won't be surprised if I start getting some things about misinformation and stuff like that for just showing you the truth on these things, right? We want to see how much the Welsh Government spends on quote-unquote policing misinformation. But all of these radical charities, via being funded by the government, it is very much like a mafia crime family. Make no mistake about it. We were seeing this, Michael Franzese actually wrote a book about it. I haven't had the pleasure of reading it yet, but actually wrote a book about it called Mafia Democracy, because he noticed there was the same things occurring in the American government, which were basically the same way that you'd run the American mafia crime families back in the day. And I'm seeing the same thing with Wales at the moment. You have the Welsh government, which is like the figurehead, the boss at the top, decides how everything goes. And then you have all of these things which they influence and pull the strings on. Politicians and everybody else, they pull the strings on, but these charities in particular, which are like the rackets the mob used to run. So you have like the Welsh Race Council, you have Sustrans, you have all of these things, so many more, Stonewall that I mentioned, that are then having massive influences on public perception and public policy, and all to do so with turning us more into this like socialist nanny state where you don't have any freedom, you'll own nothing and be happy, you live in your 15-minute city with a bunch of child rapists because it'll all be normalized and stuff like that. If you then speak out against it because you happen to be in any way conservative, nationalist, whatever, you're thrown in a gulag for the rest of your life. And your children will just be raised by the state. They force you into society now and thinking that it's a good thing because they instead of realizing that a male and female in a family, in a marriage, for example, are working together. They may be doing two separate roles, but they're working together. No, this big psyop happened with regards to feminism, and now you have the mother and the father feeling they have to be at war with each other. So they're both in work, they're both doing whatever. The family's fallen apart. There is no family anymore, which is the bedrock of society. And then you have children being raised by the state, and you wonder why they all grow up with fucking nose rings and devil horns and all stuff like that, right? And they all grow up with bright coloured hair and all of this stuff with the increased liberalization. And you think, maybe all those people banging on about slippery slopes had a bit of a point, But anyway, think they're not pushing the LGBTQ plus material in primary schools. Again, being informed by these radical left-wing charities like Stonewall, they are. Hannah Blythen, for example, recently confirmed that the Welsh Government helped Stonewall translate 2 books on LGBTQ plus families into Welsh, and they were then distributed to Welsh primary schools. Primary schools, ladies and gentlemen, they were distributed to Welsh primary schools.
Recently, our support has enabled Stonewall Cymru and Penarth to translate into Welsh 2 books on LGBTQ plus families. The books distributed to primary schools will ensure classrooms have access to inclusive literature reflecting the diversity of Wales. Recently,
reflecting the destruction of Wales, reflecting a lot of things that are symbolising the destruction of Wales. Population in collapse and stark decline. And then, obviously that means we have to import more people of completely alien cultures that have no business being here, when we could perfectly well do things on our own if not only the government was to stop being so overbearing and nanny state, but if we were to change a lot of our societal attitudes on things as well. But as I said, if you think they're not pushing it, if you think they're not trying to push the most radical gender Marxist education indoctrination onto your kids, they are, and they're being open about it. At the very least, we can thank them for being very open about it. You literally just have to be able to open your eyes and see it and believe them when they say it. And get over the fact that you are going to be struggle session to death. You are going to be struggle session to death over this stuff, but you have to stay true to principles. And really, to do that, you have to acknowledge objective morality, and to acknowledge objective morality, there's a lot of other things that have to come along with that really force you to dig deep into what your belief system really is and the fruits of it. But again, you really do want to be taking a very vested interest in what your children are being taught, and there will be some times when you realize what's going on, it will bring you into conflict with the education system, and you have to be prepared to go toe-to-toe with them. The devil, in control of the government right now, does not want to give up the grip that he already has on your children. Make no mistake about it. Remember what we talked about with James Harvey, for example, where, a dictator will always target the next generation coming. You need about 15 years to fully install a dictatorship because that's how long it takes to fully indoctrinate children into being revolutionaries. It constantly feels there's some kind of revolution that needs to take place. But eventually you'll end up with a system like is outlined in 1984. Eventually end up with a system which is outlined as something similar as it is in 1984. We are perilously close. We are perilously close. Because you'll already have children in this day and age going to their teachers, for example, and saying, my dad expressed, they won't express it in this terms, but, my daddy said this, and it'll be something vaguely conservative, maybe, something maybe a bit anti-immigrant in response to news headline about more immigrant crime, for example. And, might need to put in a call about him and, have the police investigate, or might need to call social services and have the child ripped away and all stuff like this under some forced adoption scheme. We've got some conversations about that coming up in the future as well, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very, very troubling stuff. But I don't think people realize how tyrannical the Welsh regime is. And it's been spearheaded by Welsh liberal women like Luned Morgan and Hannah Blythen and all these other people here. That's what I mean. Eventually, after this, the age of the female liberal politician is over. Feminism very soon is going to be breathing its dying breaths. Maybe not very soon. Got a good few bits of tyranny first. But a lot of this, you got to think a lot of it's coming to light now, and it's been so flamboyant, accelerated so far in the last 5 years, so fast in the last 5 years, because the time of the evil forces governing this world is coming to an end. It is coming to an end, and there will be a reckoning. And definitely the female liberal politicians will get caught up in that reckoning. I swear to God, ladies and gentlemen, I have just got a very itchy nose. I don't know what it is. I'm not a drug addict, I promise. I'm not doing the white marching powder or anything like that.